It was late at night between November 2nd and 3rd. Most people were sleeping peacefully as some storms moved overhead. Nobody thought much about them. They appeared more like rain showers, with the soft rain pelting their windows softly as they slept. But then, as if everything was too good to be true, tornado sirens began blaring. The rain started to come down harder, and their phones were sounding an EAS alert, a tornado warning for their county. But before they could do absolutely anything, the place they once called home collapsed upon them. During the spring of 2024, the Great Plains lit up violently with multiple EF3 and EF4 tornadoes happening in a span of just a couple days. Notably, in April, when a multi-day tornado outbreak took place starting in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, and other surrounding states. However, the worst of the outbreak occurred on April 27th of 2024, which ended up being the worst tornado outbreak of the year, or at least one of the worst. Occurred primarily in Oklahoma, with other tornadoes sprawling out across Arkansas, Texas, and even parts of Kansas, with the majority of the ones being in Oklahoma. One of them, including the Marietta EF4 in southern Oklahoma. The main place affected was southeast Oklahoma City and southeast Oklahoma and southern Oklahoma. Despite the incredibly devastating spring, fall still had a nasty surprise for Oklahoma. Every year, Oklahoma has a few tornadoes on average during the fall months, particularly during October and November. And due to daylight savings time, most of the tornadoes occur at night when most people are asleep. No thanks to this, during rare, dangerous, strong tornadoes during the fall, more deaths can usually happen during the fall months in Oklahoma. Luckily, this wouldn't be the case, but it definitely could have been, as on the night of November 2nd, nobody knew this was coming, and it was just an absolute insane, unwanted surprise. Entering late October, models have been increasingly coming to an agreement that a low pressure system would be moving through the plains, bringing all modes for severe weather. Some days more significant than others, and as November steadily approached, meteorologists at the SPC and local news outlets have been forecasting a potentially devastating multi-day tornado outbreak event, particularly over Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico. Out ahead of this main trough, moisture was being pulled north and west into Oklahoma and Texas, bringing a very unstable and volatile atmosphere. As the first trough approached on November 1st, a marginal risk was issued in far eastern New Mexico and western Texas. This area would primarily be a wind and hail risk. However, on November 2nd, a level 2 slight risk was issued. Once again, it was primarily thought to be mostly wind and hail, but a 5% tornado risk was issued in western Texas, with a 2% risk just barely making it to the Oklahoma City metro, and it would mostly be an overnight event. Close to the New Mexico and Texas border, a decently sized 5% tornado risk, like we talked about just a moment ago, was sitting, and close by was a dry line back here in New Mexico, and this is where the strongest storms were thought to be, was in far western Texas, eastern New Mexico, and this is where those storms would be more isolated and initially thought to be more threatening. As you can clearly see, these storms start popping up right exactly where the Storm Prediction Center had predicted, but additional showers and thunderstorms popped up in southern Kansas and the northern Texas Panhandle. These would also cause some trouble, especially for the later afternoon, evening hours, going into Oklahoma. That throughout much of the afternoon and evening, all these showers and thunderstorms converted into a messy line as they approached western Oklahoma, eventually pressing deep into Oklahoma City. And behind this wave of storms, another wave of strong thunderstorms in eastern New Mexico and western Texas was supposed to start. But 2% risk was there, because we weren't sure if the atmosphere in Oklahoma City and southern Oklahoma would regain, but we did know that eastern New Mexico and western Texas was where the strongest storms were originally thought to happen, and you can clearly see some isolated supercells down there. But what really caught us off was just how quickly this first initial line collapsed as it entered Oklahoma City. This did give out, if I remember correct, a tornado warning or two. And the strongest line was in central Oklahoma and Oklahoma City, but it collapsed very quickly as it exited Oklahoma City, and this gave uh, this area just enough time to regain instability and a shear, especially when a warm front started to shift north into Oklahoma City. And this is when some of the clouds that was left over by this initial eastern wave eventually exited the region, and you can clearly see supercells out ahead of this initial main line, and this is what gave us our extremely bad severe weather. At 11 p.m. near Waynett, Oklahoma, a supercell was moving northward, hitting a boundary which gave it enough vorticity to spawn two brief tornadoes. One of these tornadoes touched down just barely north of Waynett. First, weakest tornado. It would destroy a small outbuilding before eventually dissipating, likely being replaced by a second, unrated brief tornado to the north. After the two tornadoes, the supercell crossed the boundary, which is likely a warm front, and died off, being overtaken by cold, stable air. After the brief tornadoes, the remaining storms in Oklahoma continued lingering around, not doing too much for the next hour, which would all eventually change closer to midnight, 1, and even 2 in the morning. Starting at 1 in the morning ahead of the main line of storms, multiple supercells are now taking off, one in particular over Newcastle, which had been spinning for the past several minutes at this point. As the supercell continued northward, it was getting influenced by the blob of storms forming to the west. Just moments before the cell got gobbled up by the main line, a tornado touched the ground, causing damage to Newcastle Elementary School, which is this damage here. Soon after the Newcastle tornado, the supercell moved northeast, just northeast of Moore, where it dropped a new, much stronger EF3 tornado. This new EF3 tornado quickly destroyed multiple homes. Several of these homes had their roofs removed along with several exterior walls. Trees were debarked and pushed over, and power poles were torn down. All while this tornado was completely unwarned and devastating a neighborhood, the tornado was quickly warned moments later, after it had already devastated at least two neighborhoods, leaving multiple homes significantly damaged. This tornado would rapidly dissipate after just 5 minutes of being on the ground, eventually being replaced by a separate EF3 tornado about an hour and a half later. 30 minutes later. Eventually, this new EF3 tornado touched down fairly quickly, similar to the first sister before it, doing similar damage, this time a little further east, which resulted in multiple more homes becoming damaged, along with several well-built, well-constructed buildings southwest of Hera, including a power plant. It would eventually get rated an EF3 tornado similar to its sister before, as it did, again, similar damage, roofs being torn off and exterior walls being torn down, and the well-built building being fairly damaged. Close to 1 in the morning, a powerful EF3 tornado touchdown in Stevens County, pretty close to Comanche, Oklahoma. This supercell actually produced an EF1 that traveled over the Red River, and this EF3 tornado could have been the strongest one of the day, but missed Comanche and any other downtown parts relatively to the east. For the remainder of the early morning hours of November 3rd, the storms would clump into a massive line exiting Oklahoma City, continuing off to the east of eastern Oklahoma City and east of I-35, where widespread EF0 and EF1 tornadoes would be reported within the Bow Echo. In the morning hours of November 4th, the last piece of energy was starting to come out from the storm system. And early in the morning, around 3, 4, a new line of storms was developing in western Texas and southwestern Oklahoma. And notably, the warm front, that boundary from November 2nd to 3rd's event, was still sitting over Oklahoma City. This would create vorticity for this new line. In southwestern Oklahoma, there was a pretty big scare and even a possible tornado or two embedded in the line, but eventually it would become more outflow dominant. But a left split would occur in a way, and would this area would continue moving to the northwest into Oklahoma City, where it would eventually hit the boundary and cause a big spin up scenario where luckily no brief span of tornado occurred, but the tornado warning occurred, or tornado warnings occurred at around hours where middle and even high school students were waking up, getting ready to go to school, and the bus routes were moving around. And this actually comes to a bit of a story. My bus driver was doing his junior high route when the tornado warning occurred, so that happened. But eventually, later on, schools would close across the Oklahoma City metro, making way for the main event, which started in southern Oklahoma, as a cold front began to move through, cutting off Oklahoma City, and eventually these storms would move off to the east, creating the enhanced risk for strong tornadoes out there. Now, luckily, it wouldn't be as bad as the Oklahoma event during the night and early morning of November 3rd, but it definitely could have gone worse with the scenario. But there was no real isolated supercellular behavior in front of the main line of storms, but there still was a couple strong tornadoes. In the end, nearly 40 tornadoes were reported throughout Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri throughout the November 2nd through 4th tornado outbreak, along with a few others mixed in there, before December, where things started to calm down until late December. Out of roughly 40 tornadoes that occurred in the outbreak, at least a dozen of them were strong to very strong EF2 or EF3s. There were a couple injuries, however, the majority of them were inflicted due to search and rescue services, along with nearly 20 million dollars in damages across Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri. With central Oklahoma, which includes Oklahoma City, took the blunt of the outbreak, getting struck by 3 plus EF3s throughout the entire outbreak. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I've worked a lot on this video, and I am horribly sorry for the delays, the constant delays. I've been working with other editing software, specifically CapCut for this video, and it is working a lot better, but I'm having to try to get reused to all the CapCut stuff. I used it before, I'm trying to get reused to it again, especially on PC. It's a little more weird and difficult. I am trying to hit 200 subscribers by the end of 2025.